All right. So we are this morning talking about education as it relates to safety planning and runaway prevention. We're actually going to start with runaway prevention. I know that Brian has curated some resources that we'll walk through, that he will walk through. And we'll have an opportunity for any questions. I think instead of a high level view, he's going to provide a little bit of detail and context related to those resources so that they can be, so that we can have some like real considerations going into drafting some recommendations around the education piece. And then following the runaway prevention conversation, we're going to lean into safety planning. And we have two guests that are going to talk about the safety planning approaches that they use, Mallory Zala and Danielle. Danielle, can you pronounce your last name for me, please, so I don't muck it up?
Yeah, it's can you hear me? Danielle
Yes.
Gauthier,
Gauthier?
Gauthier.
Gauthier. Thank you.
Yeah, either way.
Thank you so much. So Mallory and Danielle will walk us through their safety planning approaches from Denver Human Services and CDHS's kind of perspectives, again, to give us some insight into current practices for consideration for recommendations. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brian, to lead us in the discussion around some of the national resources that you've curated on education for runaway prevention.
Yeah, thank you. So I was able to speak with the Chief Program Officer at National Runaway Safeline, which is the organization that operates 1-800-RUNAWAY, which is a national resource committed to runaway prevention. Their population of youth that they focus on is broader than ours. We're focused specifically on youth who've run from out-of-home care, but they have a more general perspective, but still feel that the educational materials that they put out are really of use to consider for our task force. So I'm just going to, unfortunately, Sam Gillis, who's the Chief Program Officer I spoke with, wasn't able to join the meeting today, but I checked with her and she's okay with me, spending a little bit of time to summarize the conversation that we had. And she also shared some resources with me that I'll share with you all and walk through a little bit so we can all make use of these the investments that National Runaway Safeline has already put into this. So I'm going to put into the chat. This is just the general website of National Runaway Safeline and the courses that they offer on running prevention. That's that first link. And then the second link is to our Google Drive, where I have uploaded 3 different resources that that Sam shared with me. So I'll walk through those more specifically after I give just general overview, but you can feel free to start clicking around on the website if that's useful to you. And then I'm going to just share my screen to show you what some of these things are that I'm looking at as I walk through our conversation. Let's see. Okay, so I think the big draw of this National Runaway Safeline resource is they have this 16-module life skills curriculum. Currently it's 14 modules and there are 2 that are going to be coming out really soon. So the number changes a little bit, but they're available for free to the public on that 1-800-runaway.org website. This is just an overview of some of the goals that are built into the curriculum. But just to get some context on NRS, it was created in 1974 in response to federal laws, and it's funded largely by federal grants. Sam said that her big takeaway right from the get-go of our conversation was that they do a lot of preventative education work, but they also do a lot of data collection. So they have some pretty rich understanding of who youth are who run away or who consider running away. So they're able to learn a lot about their motivations. And Sam said that young people say family dynamics are their #1 reason for reaching out to this organization about running away. And #2 is emotional abuse. So those are some of the specific content areas that the curriculum delves into. This runaway prevention curriculum was created in 2007, and it's informed by research from DePaul University. A couple of these bullet points are included here in what Sam was speaking with me about, but the large takeaway is it's focused on building life skills and having youth know when and how to reach out to trusted adults. The content is written in a trauma-informed manner with the goal of avoiding re-traumatization. You can see some of the audience details here. It's geared towards youth 12 to 20 years old, so a fairly broad range, and is available in both English and Spanish. It's used at a variety of locations, including schools and community centers. And because the curriculum is so freely available, they don't have very much information on the full extent on who's using it and when and where, because there's not like a password that they need to get confirmed with the organization or whatever. So there's not that strong of data around how it's used, but they do know it's in use in a lot of places. And they have a lot of really good usage details that we'll get into in a little bit. And one of the things I thought was most useful in the spirit of making it publicly available is you can not only download these 14 to 16 modules, but with all of this information that's available online, there's also a kit that includes facilitator notes, sample questions, pre and post activity kits, and worksheets. So it's pretty comprehensive in giving potential facilitators all the information they need to deliver this curriculum to youth who they think would be a good audience for the content. And then, so there's just some more of these details. This is what I'm trying to find here. These are the topics. We can walk through these. So each of these listed topics has its own dedicated module where the curriculum goes into some depth. So communication and listening, adolescent development, personal influences, peers and healthy relationships, families, roles and responsibilities, runaway reality, national safe connections, community response and responsibility, anger management, stress reduction, drugs and alcohol, sexuality and sexual orientation, internet safety and fun, and future life planning. So again, you can go online and you can download these yourselves. You do need to make a free login in order to download the resources, but it's instantaneous. And I think it's just for being able to track their numbers. There's no actual, you don't need any qualifications to access the materials. So National Runaway Safeline has this educational material available, but I was also really interested to learn more about other services that they offer. They have a number of ways that youth can get into contact with experts in NRS if they're either thinking about running away or have questions about running away or have already run away and are trying to make the best of the situation that they're in. So the methods of contacting NRS include, they have a phone line, that's the 1-800-RUNAWAYS phone line. They have an online chat service. They have an email service. They have texting, which is where most of their participation is driven. And they have a message board, which is quite interesting and a bit bleak, but you can go in and look on the forum and see that every day, I'm sure that just this morning, there are some entries of youth who have questions about, say, I can no longer live with my family in the state of Idaho, and I'm curious about running away. Like, what are the laws included in that? And so when that happens, an NRS employee will respond and give them some referrals and some resources and kind of begin that conversation on how to safely think about the situation that they find themselves in. A couple of other services that they offer that I found were interesting, where they offer, and the NRS offers an intermediary message service. So if a youth runs away and wants to, in some ways, talk to their family or adults or whoever it might be, but they don't want to have direct one-on-one contact, the youth can leave a message with NRS, and then NRS will deliver that message to the trusted adult or whoever that party might be. And that can work both ways, that if a youth is willing to participate, an adult can leave a message with NRS, and then NRS can deliver it to the youth, so that there's still some form of communication going on. And maybe letting your parents know that you're safe, or whatever kind of information you might want to relay. NRS is able to do that as kind of a neutral third party. They also can they can convene a three-way call and act as a neutral mediator. So it would be somebody from NRS, a youth, and then a trusted adult. And then they also do, NRS offers a lot of resource referrals. They have a broad service and provider database that maybe, you know, when they're on the phone or texting or in the message board with a youth, they have a lot of resources that they can send youth to. And then finally, they have a program that's called Home Free that's put on with Greyhound, where a youth can return home via Greyhound bus for free without paying any charges. I'm gonna switch. So that's generally what their national offerings are. And I guess let me pop over to Sam kindly sent me this Colorado snapshot. Again, this document as well is available on that Google Drive folder. But these are just some statistics from 2022 in Colorado. You can see the total number of contacts that they've had from youth. So again, this might be you thinking about running or who have already run. You can see the method in which they've contacted NRS. So about a quarter through phone calls, 3/4 through live chats, less than 1% on email, and less than 1% on forum posts. So again, it's responsive to, you know, the needs and usage types of the youth themselves. They've used one of these Greyhound bus home free tickets in the year of 2022. 46% of the youth who contacted NRS were still at home. So again, this is kind of the thinking through what a run might look like. And then, yeah, youth status at time of contact, you can see 22% of the youth were already had run and had a current runaway status. And again, this is, I know I already mentioned this nationally, that the largest reason for interacting with NRS or having this curiosity or desire to discuss the prospect of running. Number one is family dynamics, and 2 is emotional and verbal abuse. That's true nationally, but this just shows you what that's like in Colorado in particular. And then finally, some demographic information. So the large majority female, and then you can see the other options there. Age range is interesting with quite an uptick towards the older youth, and then race and ethnicity data here. So again, that's the Colorado snapshot, which is available on that Google Drive folder that we all have access to. On that Google Drive folder, you also have access to that the PDF with the basic overview of the education curriculum that I was walking through. And then I also included their big annual report, which you don't need to dig into by any means, but just the table of contents can give you an idea of what all is included there. So more information on who contacts NRS, how do they reach them, why do they reach them, what happens once the contact has emerged, and then some other trends and information. So a good amount of information to dig into. And then finally, I asked Sam if she had a magic wand and she could make any policy change to improve situations for youth who are running away, what would she do? And she said it would be investing early on and building up families, since family dynamics are the #1 reason for youth running. She would seek to provide families with tools to be successful. So sort of, again, you know, that preventative work to ensure that situations don't arise where youth feel like their only option is to run. But that's all I have prepared. I'm happy to answer questions as I can, or I know Sam would also be happy to, I think, answer questions via email, which I can share. Yeah, let me know if you all have any questions.
Thank you, Brian. So I have a couple of questions. I'm glad that they provided the Colorado data, because as you were sharing the resource, I was wondering about that, and so you must have been reading my mind. But I'm curious, among the group that we have, the task force members that we have in the subcommittee, whether any of you already were familiar with this training module and service. And if so, to the extent that you have utilized it. You know, we know that kids in Colorado are using this service, but I'm just curious whether and to what extent folks were already familiar with the training module and other services, and to what extent you've already utilized them.
I have never heard of this service, but no, I'll throw that out.
Thank you, Anna.
I know in the past we have, with our adolescents, tried to educate them on the safe text, which hooks them up with local shelters and resources in their area. But I had not heard of this program either.
Thank you, Lynette. So it sounds like it might be an underutilized resource for professionals interacting with young people, and including and especially those that might be more inclined to run away. Beth?
Yeah, I know. I have heard of this, but not prior to my current role. And I know that we are in talks of trying to get our organization listed as a resource. So if youth reach out, they could then get connected with our program for local youth. But I was not familiar with their curriculum, and I guess I'm curious, Brian, if you know, like, and I know there's different modules, but like, how long is the curriculum, and what are the numbers on the youth that are actually using and sitting through the curriculum?
Yeah, that was one of the first questions I asked her. But again, because it's so freely available, they don't have a good way of tracking that. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have very good information to give you. But it sounded like they knew it was being used by a lot of organizations, and then it's an assumption that the number of contacts they get from youth are in some way because they've learned about it in some way or form. But yeah, not the strongest data on its usage.
Thanks, Brian.
Well, and it sounds like it's a tool that that like individual young people can access the learning and go through the module. The likelihood of many kids doing that is probably really low, but because they also include the facilitator guides, it seems like there might be an opportunity for actually facilitating this content for young people who are in out-of-home placement, particularly given their higher propensity for running away from care, and also their associated longer-term risks of trafficking and just harm coming to them. It seems like there might be an opportunity to to sort of like systematize the use of a tool like this as part of like regular practice. Any other questions from the group for Brian that he may or may not be able to answer, but he can certainly connect with his contact on this particular service and education for young people. Oh, and then I did have one more question.
I have a quick question, and in any of that information, did it discuss or identify youth in foster care or out-of-home placement? And if those curriculums are used in like any residential programs or group homes, or I'm just curious.
Again, there wasn't very much data on how and when it was used, but they do have some specifically tailor-made curriculum, or not, I don't know if curriculum is the right word, but they have special made presentations for particular audiences, and that includes youth in out-of-home care. She said that she didn't want to share it with me because it was a few years old and is in need of an update, and is like on the docket to get updated with better, more current data. But this is a population that they worked with specifically in the past. So they have had times where they've done specific outreach, for youth in out-of-home care or for providers in order to reach out to those youth.
Any other questions from the group? So I would like to get a sense, again, recognizing that Brian provided a high-level overview and walked through kind of just a smattering of the resources available, still in high level. but want to get a sense more for Jordan and Brian's sake of the potential value of, again, the term I would use is like systematizing, sort of uplifting this resource, both as a resource point for young people, but also as a specific educational opportunity for facilities and other out of home placements. Is it worth, potentially considering in recommendations? And feel free to come off mute or use your raise hand icon or thumbs up just to share any thoughts that you have initially, again, recognizing that you haven't had a chance to dive into it, of the potential value of a resource like this. Lynette, I see you nodding a little bit. Okay. Beth, I see you nodding. For those of you who are off camera, Brian?
Sorry, I can come back to this after our discussion, but I could walk through one of the modules if that's useful to you, just to see what they look like more in practice, or share a link of it if you wanted to get more into what it actually looks like.
This is
how it's
Norma.
delivered.
I would love to see that, because it's hard for me to weigh in without having a little bit more information.
Context.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to, instead of sharing the link, Brian, if you could actually just walk through a module so folks can see what the content looks like.
Okay, yeah, great. So I've done both. I've dropped the link in the chat. This is for one of the 14 modules. So module 6, runaway reality. So educating youth on the reality of what running away might look like. And this is my first time looking through it in a specific detail, so bear with me as I go through. But so yeah, you have this is all geared towards a facilitator who's delivering this, rather than the the audience member or participant in the training itself. But so learning goals from the module that are given: consider why some youth decide to run away, understand the services and philosophy of the NRS, brainstorm things a young person should consider before leaving home, and consider alternatives to running away. And then you can see this smattering of like ways that folks can contact the organization. A page on defining the issue to make it clear, what main concepts are. And then I think this is the most useful overview of what the actual training looks like. So total time required for this training in particular is 75 minutes. They have a 20-minute discussion about a provided story about somebody who has run away, a 10-minute guided activity and discussion about exploring options, 10 minutes to discuss and brainstorm safety planning and running away, a 20-minute activity and discussion about runaway reality, and then a 15-minute activity for a kids call program. And again, folks have the link, so feel free to scroll through it as you like, but that's just a general overview of what the actual provided materials look like. And then again, this is one of those 16 topics that are included.
So this is not a guided online training. It is a curricula that folks can download by module. But looks like it is designed to be a live training.
And then here, let me show you. So backing up one step, in that I had clicked on the curriculum link. I had already logged in, so it knew it was me, and then I just clicked module 6. So this is the one step above link. This is what I clicked to get to that PDF. This goes over the learning goals that are available there. This is to give more information on how it's being used and who is taking it. And then these are the additional tools. So there's pre and post activities to make sure that it's been useful. But yeah, it's not like a YouTube link. Although I think they do have a YouTube channel with content there, but generally the heart of it is giving the curriculum so that an adult or community center, or whoever the facilitator of it will be, can kind of modify it to however they want to present it.
Thank you. And then there is not I wanted to come back to the policy recommendation conversation that you had And you know, because this is geared toward helping young people, like preventing runaway, but it's preventing youth from running away. That's geared toward young people. On the policy conversation, it looked like there was one of the recommendation that she I think it was a she that she suggested was around engaging or educating parents, guardians, family members around preventing runaway, particularly given the reality that familial I don't know why the word is escaping me. Conflict. I was like, starts with a C. Familial conflict is one of the main reasons that young people run away. And I see you pulled up this particular slide. Is this is this training that's geared toward caregivers?
Yeah, I don't think it's specifically training, but it's that you can folks who, like, concerned adults is how they phrase it, who have concerns about runaway potential activity, can also contact via, phone or text or chat or those different modules or those different methods that we talked about beforehand. Yeah, we're trained to help you. We're here for you too. So that's also like a type of client for the NRS. So I don't know if there are training modules specific for the parents, but parents are also
They have
able to access
assistance.
resource referrals and message services. Yeah. And yeah, all these different ways to get support are true for parents or adults as much as they are for the youth. And
Thank you. And then
FAQ,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just slowly crawling through here, but folks can do that themselves too. FAQ for parents with questions, specific tips on how to interact with your kid, validate your team's point of view, those sorts of things. So yeah, there is some out there for the families and the adults themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a really good resource. It's not as content rich, right? Like from a skill building or understanding perspective for caregivers in the same way that the modules that are really focused on the youth behavior, runaway behavior. Do you know, or did you find in your, and I know that you curated some additional resources in you, and maybe we can pivot to that. But before we do, I just want to pause really quick and see if other folks have questions specifically about 1-800-RUNAWAY and the resources that they have there. Thank
This
you,
is Norma.
Lynette. Sorry, go ahead, Norma.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't really have a question. I think it probably would be a good resource for, I could get behind being a resource for foster parents or residential settings. Maybe when children first come in, they get exposed to this. I guess I don't know how like specific our recommendations need to be, but I certainly would say that probably should be done on an individual basis, not like in a group setting, because in a group setting, kids are going to glorify running and everything else. And then the child that really needs it is not going to get the information they need. And then maybe it's something that's revisited with a child that, folks think is at serious risk of running, like just sort of saying, hey, remember we talked about this when you first came in or whatever, like something like that. I feel like, resources like this are, they can never do harm. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, thank you for that, Norma. I think I love the idea around, what might be the right kind of time and approach for providing the training modules to young people. And then also, sort of the additional resources for the caregivers, having I think collating some information for them so that they have both information as well as resources if they are faced with a situation where a young person runs away, but also like some tools and tips around preventing runaway behaviors. Thank you for that, Norma. Any other comments, reflections, or questions?
one other resource I wanted to share is they have a podcast called Let's Talk that I think is more towards like service providers or maybe adults themselves, parents or caregivers. But I just put a link to that as well. So that's another form of resource. It's not it has a variety of topics that I think sound really interesting, like internalized homophobia, confronting mental health stigma. Yeah, just another range of resources they offer via podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Any other reflections, questions, comments around? It sounds like a really rich resource that is probably underutilized. Awesome, thank you. Brian, you want to share some of the other resources that you pulled together?
I've walked through the 3 that I put up on the
Gotcha.
shared
Okay.
Google Drive. So it's their annual report for the whole national program, the kind of 101 overview of their education curriculum, and then the state of Colorado snapshot.
Awesome, thank you, Brian. My bad. Awesome. Pausing again just to see if anyone has any thoughts, reflections, and ideas around the extent to which this resource could be made more widely available and widely known, and or incorporated into any specific recommendations.
I do think there would be an opportunity, maybe not like this full curriculum, but looking at like something that they could implement on the front end for all youth who come into a facility and sitting through a training on just keeping themselves safe. I don't think, just briefly going through it, that this would be applicable, but maybe they'd be open to tailoring a specific training that youth could go through on the front end.
Hey, Beth, this is Janelle. Do you think that it would be good for like, I'm wondering like when it comes to like Jack services, you know, like maybe like some type of intake or handout or something, but depending on what time they come in and the state they come in, I don't know what that would even look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think when a youth comes in through the Jack, I handing off a piece of paper, right? Like I don't necessarily know if that would land, but if we had like Third Way or Southern Peaks, I know I have a meeting with Third Way this afternoon, and I'm trying to bring in the Denver Child Advocacy Center to see how we could partner and bring in some of the curriculum, because we're both trained in NICMIC's curriculum in regards to online safety, and seeing if Third Way would be willing to have us come in and talk about that aspect of it. I don't know.
Janelle,
So one of the things that, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, Doris, I was just wondering if we could expand on Janelle, what I think I hear your larger question being, which is methodology of delivering services. Is it a piece of paper? Is it a video? I was just wondering potentially if we could expand on really high level, maybe not even specific to this, but like what methodologies does this group believe would be most beneficial? Because I think that would be really helpful in kind of drafting what we want to focus our attention and bluntly state resources on.
That's exactly what it was, Jordan. You know, I was kind of saying that to Beth, like, as she saw, like, I don't know if a piece of paper would be good. And that's what I was saying, like, depending on the state that they're coming in, what does that look like? I think, you know, best point to making sure that the kids know that this is there and kind of getting ahead of that and what to do. It's almost, it's a very, I don't know, creative way of safety planning on the go. So it's something to stick in their mind if and when they do run. So it's just what the best practice is for that. And I think that it's going to be an array of things because each kiddo's situation is different, where they're placed, what mental state they're in, all of that. And
Mhm.
so I think there's just going to be, I personally think that we should have a couple to choose from. And then the person dealing with the kiddo should, you know, obviously nobody should be dealing with kiddos that isn't trained well enough to kind of assess the situation and see which would be best for them. So I think we should come up with 1 to 3 different ways personally.
Great. And if we were
Thank
to,
you, Janelle.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
I'm sorry, Doris. And again, just trying to get like kind of a broad framework as we were to draft this. If we had to pick 3, to your point, Janelle, of just broadly methodology, what would those top 3 be?
Well, 1 would be a text, but some of them don't have phones.
Right.
So I would say that the paper's hard. That's right. Like they're not going to take that paper and they're going to throw their stuff and they don't want it on them. And I don't know, maybe a sticker, maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Or
Like if we could give them a video option, like
we could
upon
give them a
intake.
video
Is that possible?
yeah, but a lot of these kids come in at 1 a.m. in the morning too. So they're not going to sit down and watch a video. You know what I mean? And who knows that they'll be there at 6 a.m. So the video option isn't always going to be appropriate for sure.
Could it be 1 of the 3 though?
I think it's one option. Yeah. It's probably more appropriate at a place like Third Way than it is at the Jack.
Thank you, Janelle. Norma?
So I think it's kind of what I was saying at the beginning, right? Like I think I think meeting with the young person when they come in, right? And so let's say they come in at 1 a.m. So we're not going to do it at 1 a.m. We're going to do it at 9 a.m. the next morning or whatever, right? But at sort of within the first 24 hours of them coming into a program, you know, somebody just sitting down with them and talking with them about this resource. And then it's seldom, in my opinion, at least in, you know, in our history of doing residential work, it's seldom that a child literally just gets up and runs without us having any inclination that it may happen. And so I guess, you know, sort of what I was suggesting was that when we think a child may run again, then maybe that's a trigger for us to reinitiate the conversation, right? Like reinitiate the resource. So, hey, know you've been having a hard time or a hard day or whatever. I know that you're thinking about running or you may be thinking about running. And so I just kind of want to review this with you again as a resource for you. You know, I know we talked about it when you first came in. Want to just revisit this with you now to just kind of bring it back to the forefront of their mind as an option for them, right? As something they may want to look into. And we do it before it reaches the point where they're in crisis and they are walking out the door when they're not hearing anything we're saying. But instead, we're doing it as a prevention kind of thing for them when we think they might start, you know, the conversation in their head about whether or not they should run. And sometimes we're going to peg it wrong. Sometimes they may not even be thinking about running, but it won't do any harm to have this conversation with them.
Thanks, Norma. That's really, those kind of ideas are really, really helpful. Thank you.
And so I had some sort of framing questions and now I just have more. I'm joining the conversation, so FYI. I wonder if there are sort of 3 buckets of considerations. One is around broadly, like a broad campaign around resources that could be available to young people who run away. And so like Brian put in the chat, the flyer with the tabs, so that if young people run away, they, you know, they have this information on, you know, where they can call for some assistance. That's not really education. It's a resource for that could be, you know, a broad campaign for young people writ large, not just those that are placed in out-of-home care. There's the component around ensuring that those that are working with young people in both in and out of care, and I know that we're focusing on kids who are in out-of-home placement, but so that they know what resources are available, including educational resources for kids who might be at risk for running away, so that they could help strengthen their skill set to reduce the likelihood of them running away. And if they do run away, you know, again, making sure that they know what resources are available to them. And then there are the young people that have a history of running away, and those who have run away, and so they've been recovered, and so wanting to prevent future runs, the more targeted approach, that could be, you know, that one-on-one with them, to again reduce the likelihood of them running again. And so all of those pieces, I think, would be important for a comprehensive approach to ensuring kids are safe when they're on the street or have a resource to call, mitigating the risk of kids running away, who may not have a history of running away, and then also reducing the likelihood of a child running again, who does have that history. And so I think about, you know, I feel like a resource like this could be helpful in all of those contexts. And, you know, I think it's a matter of figuring out how to kind of cobble together a recommendation or set of recommendations, that consider those different, I don't want to use the word target, but focus areas. And then Janelle and then Beth, I see you have your hands up.
Yeah, I was just wondering when you were talking about some of the ideas, you said the word campaign, I think, and it triggered me. But I mean, out here we had with the council, we had this huge campaign with like all these posters and, you know, HT awareness stuff with like QR codes, where to call, and it led to resources and things like that. And they had a pretty decent turnout. I'm just wondering if that's something that we look into, like putting stickers around posters and places where lots of high-risk runaway youth, the train station, you know, hot corners, things like that, 7-Elevens, whatever, if something like that would be good to catch their eye, with the QR code on it to kind of lead to those resources. I don't know. I'm just
That's exactly what I was thinking. In addition to you know, I mean, dare I say, in facilities, there are, I mean, you know, not to promote it, but also so that, like, you know, there are going to be kids who run away. And so if they're running away and they're grabbing the tab on their way out, we know that they at least have a resource.
yeah, it's just something like that. I don't know. Just
Yeah. But that's exactly what I was thinking, Janelle, like really, like, you know, because again, you know, this group was tapped for the task force because you're actively engaged with this population in some way, and yet there was limited knowledge of this resource. And so, you know, I think you know, really like spreading that as a you know, as a resource that's available to those that work with young people as well as young people themselves seems like it would be helpful. Beth?
Yeah, so I would suggest doing something what the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking has done, which is dedicating, right, a resource guide of here are all the resources for, right, and it breaks down within counties and what are their limitations, right? They offer housing, those kinds of things, and creating one database that's, you know, with the lab, they check in because we're a part of that. I get a call every year, and it's an hour meeting where it goes through what services do you still offer? Have your services expanded, right? So it's an updated list that's constantly going to where, whether it's facilities or caseworkers or foster parents, can jump on and see here's a list of all the resources, and what supports they can offer.
And then how does the messaging go out to those who work with young people around the updated information?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that going back to Janelle's point, like that would be something that we could, to getting it out to families directly, right? When a youth does come in, that it's that information, whether it's a card, and maybe it's I don't know, a QR code is something that our team has thrown around, but that is being passed on to supervisors and then really building it in. I feel like the lab has established but they've been around for, I don't even know how long, but quite a while to build that out. But working with service providers and building that into like annual training. And then the expectation is that who's ever overseeing this is doing those checkups each year to ensure that it's up to date. It can't just be a one and done.
Yeah, thank you for that, Beth. And I see Lynette's comment in the chat that they gave out laminated cards to youth with the tuck safe information. So it sounds like maybe a similar approach to that, not just focused on youth, but also the caregivers, be they families or placement facilities. And then I like the idea, Beth, you named the annual training. And so incorporating, I don't know if there are currently annual training requirements for placements around this specific topic. If not, maybe incorporating that as a recommendation. And then I see Brian in the chat, there's this option for custom made training. I imagine that you don't know like what costs might be associated with that custom made.
This is totally an assumption, but I would assume that there wouldn't be a cost. But that's just,
Okay.
I don't have hard evidence to support that, but it just seems like that would be, they're not a for-profit corporation, but I don't know. Thank
you, Brian. Maybe that's something we want to learn more about, because if there is an opportunity to provide, I heard from, several of you about, really liking this kind of training option, but for one module being, this is me adding in 75 minutes, going through all, is it 14 or 16?
It's currently there's 14 available, but I think there's 2 that are going to get launched soon. So they use both numbers.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, that's a lot of time. And for kids who have a propensity for running away, they're not going to go through all those trainings. They probably won't be in the placement long enough to go through all those trainings. So if there is an opportunity to provide some or to develop some customized training that could be at intake, for instance, that is more reasonable or doable, then kind of exploring that path might be worth at least gathering some information.
And this is the page that specifically mentions sample training topics include, and one of them is youth running from care. So that's why I initially contacted Sam Gillis to talk about this. And she said that that they have like training already made for our the audience, but it would just need to be updated and refreshed a little bit. But the bones are already there. Okay.
And she didn't give a sense of how long that training, when it was developed and previously, was?
My sense was maybe like 5 or 7 years ago.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. No, I meant like not how long ago, but how long the training itself was.
Oh,
an
no,
hour,
I'm
an
not
hour
sure.
and a half.
I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Thank you, Brian. Danielle? You have your hand up.
Sorry, I was trying to find my mouse and all that. I was actually gonna just trying to remember my thoughts. There is a really cool resource I have used previously and I use a lot, and it sounds really similar to what Beth you were talking about. There's some of you might have known it. Findhelp.org. It's a resource database and basically a search engine, but to have that more geared to like resources for kids and runaways and how they do it, all you do is plug a zip code in and you get all of the resources that are currently active in those areas, whether it's food. Yeah, it's a super cool resource. But what I'm kind of getting at is to have like something like that for this and what we're talking about, and very much like what Beth was talking about. I do think with like QR codes, given like our kids are not gonna want to like grab things, paper things, that they'll have their phones, they can see a QR code, and whether it's at a bus stop or a high traffic area they go to, I think that's such a cool idea. And that way they can have that, but and also families. That was kind of just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Danielle.
Hey,
Thank you.
Doris.
And sorry, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Would you mind if I just very briefly share my screen and go through the outreach stuff they have?
Why would I mind that?
You can say no, Brian.
I would never do that.
Just because he's lined up fairly well with I think what we're already talking about. But yes, I think they realize like they have a lot of promotional materials on TikTok and YouTube and different social media. But so these are I really agree with the point that like they have a bookmark PDF, but I don't think any of these youth are going to be reading paper books. But so these are social media graphics or just images that can be dropped in. So they look new, which is nice. And then some of them have, I guess maybe some of them have QR codes. This is specifically looking at the forum. This is more of a general like overview of these are all the things that we do. So that's a bit more, wordy. I had put a link in already. They call this the palm card or like the street outreach. But yeah, QR code there, overview of services. This is the bookmark, which might be a bit antiquated, but sort of some, educational materials on dealing with stress, and then also talking about the resource availability. This is the pull tab flyer that I already shared. But again, I think the graphics look really good. And it's time stamped as this year, which is nice. And then this is more specific, but this is for that Greyhound Home Free program. I just wanted to cruise through those so folks know what's out there already that could be built from.
Thank you, Brian. So I think that there are two things that came up that sounds like there was some interest in leveraging some of the resources that are already out there that 1-800 Runaway has already pulled together and have in a usable format, thinking about the ways in which young people engage with material. And so the option that has the QR code sounds like it would be really appealing. And the resource guide that can be made available, updated annually. So there would need to be some resources dedicated to ensuring that the resource guide is current for available resources across the state, that has a feature that allows people to search by zip code or location, so that they're providing resources that are actually within the vicinity of the young person. And that includes, maybe even a wide array of kinds of services that the young person might need, but also that might be applicable not just to young people who run away, but also to the caregivers. I think particularly when we think about, and I know that the other group is talking about foster families, but parents and other family-based caregivers having resources that they could leverage to, I think, prevent kids from running away if there is a likelihood or they know that the young person has a past history of running away, and also what to do if the young person is on the run. Seems like that would also be a valuable resource or valuable to include in that resource tool. I don't see any nods or anyone jumping up and down with their raised hand icon to suggest that I was misstating anyone. So I think, okay, fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. I want to make sure that we get a chance to hear from our guests today. And I don't know if either of you, Mallory or Danielle, had any time restraints with today. So why don't we just go ahead and jump in. I was trying to make sure Mallory, you're on camera now. So I was trying to find you and I was like, I can't find you. Now I found you. You're in the middle of my screen. Okay, so Mallory is the social caseworker for Denver Department of Human Services, and Danielle is CDHS social caseworker lead of the sexual abuse intervention team. And we brought them here to learn more about safety planning and the approaches and tools that each of you uses in working with young people who have run away. And want to open the floor for each of you to provide a little bit of an introduction and background on who you are, the work that you do, and then if you could share your approach to safety planning as we think about and brainstorm any potential recommendations for safety planning around young people in general who are in out of home care, as well as young people who have had a history of running away or have returned from a runaway episode, as we think about safety planning as both a prevention and a post-runaway intervention approach. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Mallory, first, and then we'll hear from Danielle.
Hey everyone, my name is Mallory Zala. I actually did used to be a social caseworker, but this role, I'm on Beth's team. So I'm a youth outreach specialist, and I can give kind of an overview of our team and what we do, and then I can go ahead and jump into the safety planning aspect of things. So our team, we are the Ronnie team, the Runaway Outreach Notification and Intervention team. We are currently under, no worries, Doris. We are under the Department of Safety, so Denver Public Safety Youth Programs. And so there's two parts of our team. We have an intake team and then an outreach team. And so our intake team, we actually receive all of the runaway calls from DPD. So they will take those run reports, they will do a safety assessment with the family, determine the level of risk. And so when that youth is considered to be high risk, our outreach team will take the case. And so we will meet with the youth in the community, provide resources, work on goals and intervention with the youth and with the family, and kind of whatever that need is, we will work to support them. And we're also part of the Denver multidisciplinary team. So when a youth is confirmed or suspected to be a victim of trafficking, we will also work with that youth to kind of identify what those needs are and to just see how we can support them. So obviously with that, a big part of our work is safety planning and utilizing harm reduction techniques with that youth. And we do have a high caseload. We work with lots of youth. So our work is very specific and individualized to that specific client. And so our team, we've put together kind of 3 general guides to safety planning, as well as safety agreements, which is what we like to call them, to work on with the youth in the field. And so those youth are able to take that agreement with them and kind of work on it. Obviously, if it's safe to do so, to take that agreement with them and to refer back to. So kind of the most common situations that we see where we safety plan with youth is obviously human trafficking, domestic violence, running behaviors, mental health, suicidal ideation, and substance use. So I can go ahead and share my screen and kind of walk everyone through what those look like. 1 second. Okay, can everyone see this? Okay. So starting with our plan that is tailored to trafficking and domestic violence, obviously when we're safety planning with a youth in the community, we will focus on immediate concerns. Is the environment safe for us? Is the environment safe for that youth? Is there a need for law enforcement? With substance use, is there a need for Narcan use in that immediate moment? And we'll kind of assess whatever that situation may be. So immediate needs, action steps taken by the youth, action steps taken by us. So if it's a trafficking situation or if they're in a harmful or unsafe situation, can they call us? Can we go meet them? and kind of provide resources in that moment. And when we are engaging with youth, we like to have conversations with them about what does safety mean to them. So given current and past experiences for a lot of our youth, being safe means something different to each of them. So when I'm safety planning with them, I like to ask them questions such as, what is an uncomfortable situation to you, or what are some signs that a situation is turning uncomfortable for you, instead of using the word safe. So specifically with human trafficking or a situation with a partner that is abusive to them, if they do not wish to return to that situation, it's all about exploring options with them. Can they stay somewhere with family or friends? Do they need access to a shelter or a drop-in center? Do we need to work on an exit plan with that youth? And a big piece of that, do they have access to basic needs or their daily needs, such as medication, access to medication, food, and clothing? And then if they do want to return to their trafficker or an unsafe partner, that's when we really utilize our harm reduction techniques. So we always want to make sure that we're respecting that youth's choice and making sure it's non-judgmental communication. So I ensure all of my youth know that they can reach out to me. If they do have a phone, they have my number, they have our Ronnie crisis line. They know my specific hours that I work. They know that they can reach out to our crisis line if I'm not working at that time. So just talking with them about what would they do if they are in an uncomfortable situation, who else can they call? So like I mentioned, our crisis line, making sure that they have access to that. Do they have access to a phone? Do they have access to someone else's phone that they're able to use? So who else can we bring into this safety plan? Other professionals that are involved with that youth, friends, neighbors, family. What are some other places that they can go? And really helping them to build out their support network. If they have a support network, sometimes it is just us. And so then we utilize other team members too, making sure the youth has multiple people to reach out to if they need to. And so what an exit plan looks like, a big part of safety planning is just making sure that they have concrete resources. So they know where they can go, they know where it's located, they know the hours of that specific, let's say it's a shelter, so urban peak, and just making sure that they know that they have access to drop-in centers too is really helpful. If they need anything like food, hygiene materials, clothes, other referrals to community organizations, or just somewhere to take a nap or a shower. And so we emphasized, the drop-in center for Urban Peak for that. And then we work with them too, just for long-term support, dependent upon their needs. So here I just have a couple organizations that we work with listed out, but we also have a much larger resource list. And we're working on currently putting together a resource list that we can provide to youth too. And so we have Emerson Street on here, Streets Hope. And then, if they are in immediate danger, making sure they know who to call if they're able to. So 911, there's situations where we will go meet the youth while waiting law enforcement arrival, depending on what is going on. And we have the National Human Trafficking Hotline here. And so kind of with this running, obviously we continue, since all of our youth have running behaviors, so we continue to just have open conversations with them about running. So what are some of their triggers? What causes them to run? How can we prevent that in the future? And then just having a conversation about, like, if they do run, can they reach out to us? Can they text us? Can they call us? Can they let us know that they're okay? And if they need anything. So lots of times we will go meet the youth wherever they're at, and we'll bring them like one of our Reclaiming Hope bags, make sure they have access to hygienic items, clothing, food, as well as yeah, transportation. We're also able to provide transportation if they are needing to get somewhere. And so this is our suicidal ideation and mental health safety plan. And lots of times there's lots going on with the youth. So we kind of use all three aspects of all of these guides when we're interacting with them. And so for this, if, yeah, they meet criteria for an M1 hold, calling 911, identifying immediate coping skills, and just having open conversations about what some of their triggers look like. What are some warning signs when they're feeling suicidal or having a mental health crisis? So thoughts, images, situation, behaviors, and really helping them build out their coping skills. So with each youth, finding out what really works for them, like when I'm upset, can I listen to music? Can I call you? Can I call my friends? I've provided most of my kids with journals if they do like journaling, or fidgets, or sensory items that they can have to kind of work to calm them down in that moment. So along those lines, discussing grounding techniques with them, emphasizing again their support system, making sure they know who they can reach out to in a time of need, and just emphasizing distractions. What do they like to do? What kind of activities can we help get them set up with that they enjoy? Making the physical environment safe. So if we need to purchase a lockbox for them, we can do that. And again, just emphasizing concrete resources such as the Stay Safe program through WellPower. And this is just a very short list of resources. If they like art, there's a specific program that WellPower offers, Emerson Street. And this part's important too. So making sure that us as outreach specialists and the youth know where walk-in centers are. And so I just have it listed out areas for walk-in centers, since our youth are located, they are all over. And I think it's also important when safety planning to make sure that they know what to expect. So what happens if you were to call a crisis line, or if you were to call 988, the suicide line? So I have it kind of listed out just again as a guide for us to talk with youth about what will happen when you do call 988, because it's just important that they know exactly what to expect, so there's no surprises, and then it makes it a little less intimidating for them as well. Also with the walk-in center, what does that actually look like? Just helping prepare them so they know that that's an option that they can utilize. And just speaking with them, what is one thing that's most important to you and worth living for with the suicidal ideation safety plan. And then lastly, we have our substance use safety plan. So again, assessing that current risk. And so we utilize harm reduction techniques in all of our safety planning conversations with youth, but especially with substance use. So we all are trained in using Narcan. I always have Narcan on me. I always make sure my youth that use also have Narcan. And fentanyl testing strips for them as well. So just using harm reduction practices, making sure they know how to actually use it, walking through it with them, showing them videos, ensuring they know signs of overdose, like what that actually looks like. And same with testing strips. So just opening those up and just going through that with them so they can use them if they are planning to use. And also just really emphasizing those open conversations. So if my client is planning to use, do they feel comfortable using Narcan on themselves or others? Do they feel comfortable with the test strips that we provided? Do they know the risk of using alone? Can they use with someone else? Do they know the signs of ODing? Do they have access to a phone? Can they let me know when they're planning to use, or another trusted adult? As well as providing some more of that psychoeducation around using and some overdose prevention tips, and just more of having long-term conversations with them as well about maintaining their sobriety, talking through it with them. What are some of their motivations to remain sober? Having them write it out, which I'll show you on the agreement that we can leave with youth. And what are some things that they can do when they're experiencing cravings? So I just have listed out a bunch of different examples here, since not everything will work for each youth. So they can call their support, they can eat, they can go to a meeting, read some recovery material, and then just helping change some of those thought patterns. So reminding themselves that cravings can pass, thinking of consequences. Can we take walks with them, drawing, coloring, and just places that they can go for positive distraction, places they like going, parks, libraries, recovery meetings, and just again making sure that they know that their own triggers are talking through that with them, and that they know who they can support. And so we're still working on kind of coming up with a longer list of recovery resources that we can provide to them in the field. But these are kind of what our guides look like. And so with those guides, I'll show you an example of one of our agreements that we have, but we have safety agreements that the youth, if it's safe to do so, can keep with them and kind of write on. They're a lot more user friendly and kind of look nice for the youth to just fill out, and just kind of easier than having a guide with a lot of words on it for them. And so it's kind of just summarizing what the guides are. And just for this one, they can fill out, 3 positive distractions, coping mechanisms, and then 3 people they can call, places they can go. And this is where we'll put some of our main resources on this for them, so they can kind of refer to these agreements when they're having a mental health crisis, a substance use crisis, or they're just needing some resources. So I think I covered kind of all of our main aspects of safety planning, but if anyone has questions or wants me to go over a specific part, I can do that.
Thank you so much, Mallory. I think I'd like to go ahead and have Danielle introduce herself and share a little bit of their approach to safety planning, and then we can do questions at the end, so that we give Danielle a chance to speak as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mallory.
All right, so I am Danielle Gauthier. I do apologize for my background. I am sitting on my couch. My dog might show up. I have a leg injury, so I'm just comfiest this way today.
No apologies needed, and we would love to have a dog bomb.
Yeah, he is sitting right next to me. He doesn't want to be on camera. So I am the ongoing lead caseworker on the sex abuse intervention team here at Denver Department of Human Services. I work under Lisa Adame, who I know most of you are probably familiar with. We take part in the MDT just like all of y'all do, with Mallory and Beth. We do specialize in sex abuse, obviously, which includes the human trafficking components that we're talking about here today, including, we deal with, all sorts of different sex abuse from all ages of kids, even up to 21. We work with the families as well. We do take a more holistic approach with we're wrapping in the whole entire family unit if we can. Not just a kiddo. We work in collaboration with a lot of different entities in the city and county, even federal if there's FBI involved. We're working with, the MDT, the Ronnie Project, when we have kiddos that are being trafficked. We also are working with law enforcement if we need to be, and we're also court involved most likely, especially if kiddos have juvenile delinquency cases. We will show up to court with them and advocate or provide whatever updates we need to do. That's just kind of a little bit of, our sex abuse team at Denver. We're a little bit more limited in the more hands-on approach that I know Mallory's able to do with the Ronnie project, which is also why we work with them, because we need them. For like, the best way I can try to explain it is like kind of from beginning to walk through like kind of the phases of when we get a trafficking case, and what that kind of run report and safety planning would look like with the kiddo and or their family. Because again, we have these families are still involved. A lot of them are really worried, scared, don't know what's happening. Some could be also part of what's happening to the kid. So when we have a kiddo in our care or on our caseload, I should say, because they may or may not be in our custody, that would be one of the things we have to figure out. We'll receive notice a kiddo is run. Somebody in the family might call us. We might get reports or referrals right away just from a hotline. We go out and try to assess whatever situation can. Say if it's a kiddo I have on my caseload, I'll typically get notified by the family. They're gonna call me, let me know what's going on. When it happened, I'll ask the questions of, who, what, where, when, why, all the things, knowing what time they left. Do you have any idea of, what might have triggered their run? Did they leave with anything, grab anything? Do they have their medications on them? Do we know that? Do they have medications to take? Are there specific worries? Are they possibly self-harming, or could they self-harm harm somebody else while they're on run? Just kind of breaking some of that stuff down. We might already know some of that stuff if we've created some rapport and relationships with the family and the kiddo before they ran. Depending if they're in our custody or not, we also have to make sure that's reported to law enforcement and NCMEC. If they're in our custody, we definitely need to make sure that law enforcement and NCMEC are called. We get the report numbers, we provide that, make incident reports here on DHS's end. We send some of this information to whether it's the MDT or the professionals involved on the case. If they have pretrial involved, we have to make sure pretrials involved are notified. Or sometimes it's the reverse, and they're the ones that are notifying us, and they're like, we already have a warrant out, it's getting worked on. Sometimes they have to go and do that, so we can get bench warrants as well if they are involved in the JD system, which can sometimes assist, but in reality, it's not always the most helpful, because kids have to do something to then be picked up on that warrant too. And that's not always happening. We don't always want kids also to pick up another charge on the run. Like, that's not ideal. So if we can, try to stay in touch with that kiddo on the run, just even to know if they're safe. I've had instances where the youth, they're not going to want to tell me, I'm the department. However, they could have a really great trusting relationship with a mentor already, or possibly a GAL, guardian ad litem, or a counsel for youth. And they know there is some protection there of, that attorney-client privilege. So there is that trust kind of built into that relationship. So I've worked with GALs and CFYs that can somehow reach out to the kiddo. They might not tell them where they're at, but they'll be like, yes, I'm okay, I'm safe, and you can let the team know. And let my mom know, let this. So we can at least start there, just to know kiddo's okay. Sometimes they'll stop communicating, sometimes they'll keep talking, and we can use those kind of relationships to either help the kiddo or encourage kiddo to turn themselves in, or come back. That has happened on a few of my cases at times. I'll lean on whoever I can to help this kid. I'm just looking, if kiddo does come back, depending if they get picked up and they have to be brought in, go into custody, we'll walk one step at a time. If they're not that way and they're just going home, no charges picked up, didn't have a warrant or anything, we bring kid home to parents. So that would be like kind of the recovery period. So we would need to know like what happened, how did they appear, or do they have any injuries, just a general safety assessment. I would then report back to NCMEC, let them know kiddo's back. I'll give them a general gist of, they were located here, no law enforcement, they had some injuries or no injuries, and There's a list that NCMEC will say to send us that will kind of give them a few details. We can't give them too much without releases and provide more identifying information. We can't do that necessarily, but enough to know like they can close that out for the time being, and we know kiddo's okay. I'll do like an HRV tool, the high risk. Sorry, I'm now blanking on the acronym. Our human trafficking or high risk tool. So when I see the kiddo, I can go meet with kiddo, kind of understand what's going on and be able to fill out that HRV tool after. I don't actually do it with the child. Like I'm not sitting there with this paper going over it in a clinical setting. I don't find that to be great to do with a kid. They are super smart. They're going to look at me and be like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm not going to talk to you. I am not some like experiment for you to be like studying. Like I've gotten some kid, like they will be quite honest and transparent with how they feel about the whole thing. So I will try to have just more organic conversations with them just to understand like what's going on. Where if they tell me something of where they went, that would be great. But I do struggle to always get that information from them. As like that government department agency, that's tricky. And again, that's why we'll refer to Ronnie Project through our HRV tool. We'll go to MDT and really bring a lot of those other community entities, those resources into play, like mentoring and all sorts to help with that part of this. Because again, there's some limitations. There's going to be limitations just coming from a department and a government agency. And also a lot of these kids come from families that have been systematically kind of tossed aside by the system. They've been missed by the system. We know kids within the system don't like the system. The families distrust the system. So we have to kind of work with some of that too. So trying to be creative in how I talk with kids, making sure like, I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I just want to make sure you are being safe. If I can't get you to stop running, what can we do to help you be safe while running? So we do take a more of a harm reduction approach to some of that. Again, we are limited in a lot of what we can do. So I will talk to kids about like, are you using substances? What substances are you using? Do you know, like kind of like what Mallory had already touched on? Like, do you know where you can go to get help with those things? Do you know how to use them properly or use them without getting hurt or sick, or Narcan, or a lot of those pieces? I will also talk about safe sex with kids because that's a lot of time what's happening on runs too. Do they know they can get condoms? Are they on birth control? Do they want to be on birth control? Because we can help try to figure that out and get them those services if they want or need. Make sure they have that access to those things. If they know they can go to an emergency room, even if they might not have a primary care doctor and they really need to get care, they can go to an emergency room, but sometimes they don't know that. So making sure they have that information. We'll sit down and go over kind of a general run plan that I'm going to go over with not just the youth, but I'm going over with the family too. So with the family piece, I'll sit down, mom, dad, guardian, caregiver, siblings, whoever wants to be there for it. We'll go over just, I think there's a question.
No, finish your thought. I just,
okay.
Yeah.
We'll go over what a general safety plan would be. Again, it's kind of more informal, but hey, if kiddo's going to run, kiddo's going to run. And that is the reality of situations. And we have to work with reality. We hope and dream that kid's not going to any longer, but what we see, it will happen again, and possibly even after that. Kids are either going to be running to something or from something, depending on the situation, the family, the child. So when a kid runs, what we want the family to do is notify the proper professionals. We'll notify law enforcement. If kiddo's actually in our custody and they're just placed in this home, still we got to call law enforcement. I need that report number. If I need to call law enforcement, I will. And then I need all that information so I can do NCMEC again. But make sure kiddo has emergency contacts. whether they're already programmed in their phone. So a lot of kids have stuff memorized, but to see if they do, if they have my number memorized, or they have the nearest, their guardian's phone number memorized, a mentor's phone number memorized, if they know where they can go for emergency care. I'll also go over with them as like, how are you getting your needs met while you're on the run? Are you like picking up work? Are you selling substances? Because I've had that happen with kiddos that needed money. I've had, there's kids that will steal, or they find that's when they also find their traffic court, or somebody that pulls them into the gang life. That's also how they get their needs met. So I'm trying to figure some of that out. And also, do you have a phone? If you don't, are you able to get one? Do you need one? Things like that. But at the end of the day, what I do ask my kids, like, if you run, please let us know. You don't have to tell us the location, because most likely they're not going to. Let us know you are safe, and just even check in like every other day to let us know you're still safe. And if you're ever willing to meet, I'll come meet you in the community if I can. I will reach out to all of your people for you and let them know you're safe. If, say, Mallory's on the case, I will contact Mallory, because we do work with them. Be like, can you help and meet with this kid, just so we know what's kind of going on. Again, using those other resources, because there is some limits to the department, more so with the reputation and that type of relationship with the community. I
want to pause there really quick, Danielle, just in the interest of time, to make sure that we have an opportunity for folks to ask questions. And I have, I'll kick us off. I have a question for you and Mallory. How do kids come to your attention and sort of get on your respective caseloads?
Yeah, so they'll typically be brought to our attention. I mean, sometimes they can be brought through MDT, but without an actual hotline referral, we won't get that case. Or we could be ordered on by court as well. So there's a lot of JD cases that we have, that I actually have on my caseload, that I was ordered onto for placement purposes, but then now I'm involved. You got me, so I'm going to do the whole thing with you. But yeah, either like hotline referrals. Our team specifically will take sex abuse specific and human trafficking. So it will, get staffed, and either if a case is open, will be sent to us. Sometimes from another team, if they're realizing this is too much, they don't have the expertise for a trafficking case, they'll staff with us, and we'll get it that way, even if it's already been an ongoing case.
Okay, thank you. And Mallory?
So for us, we will receive cases one of two ways. So one through our Ronnie project. So if our intake team takes a run report and they determine that client to be high risk or have concerns of trafficking, or it will be referred through the MDT, which Beth, you can expand on if you'd like, but those are from community organizations that will refer to us, or DHS, or through the high risk victimization tool.
Thank you, Mallory. And then Lynette raised a question that I had as well. As we think about the opportunity for statewide recommendations, knowing that not all places in the state are going to have the kinds of resources to dedicate to this, like in Denver. And so just want to lift up, like, if you were Mallory and Danielle, sort of thinking about specifically the intake and safety assessment tool, rather the safety assessment tools that you use. If there were some things that you would lift up as high priority that could be more easily implemented in places that have less resources, what in those tools would you lift up as the most important? Does that question make sense?
I think, are you more so asking, like, are there like gaps that we see that could benefit like those more rural areas that don't have the same resources?
I'm thinking not necessarily gaps, but just like, you have, like Mallory walked us through 3 different tools, and you have dedicated teams. And Danielle, it sounded like you even though you didn't show us like specific tools that you have tools that you're referencing, you've kind of internalized the questions. But if there was so like some key aspects of the tools that you use that could be more easily implemented in places that don't have as many resources to safety plan for young people who have run from care or who are at risk for running, what would be like the key things that you think should be absolutely incorporated to any approach?
Yeah, actually, with the HRV tool, which was one of the biggest ones we use here at the department for one of the tools we use for the assessment piece is what it brings it to mind is like there's a lot of like kids don't know where they can go all the time. And I do think like in Denver, there's plenty of places like really close by transportation, like you can get on a free bus with anyone under 18. Like that transportation piece could be key in a lot of areas, or just educating kids on some of that reality of running, which I know we've talked about a lot here today too. It's like what that actually looks like. Because at least even just talking with kids, there seems to be some disconnect there where there's a romanticized view of running too at times. But to have more of that education and knowledge out there throughout the state for families too, because kids don't know like, oh, I can access birth control at my age, like by myself, like what? So even stuff like that could be huge. I do think that's a huge part that I would love to emphasize even more for people.
Thank you.
And then kind of going off of that, I guess I would say the main aspects of safety planning is one, building rapport with that youth so they will utilize you as a resource. And then two, making sure you have kind of a knowledge of the resources in that community. But then I also hear you, Lynette, her comment, knowing caseworkers are carrying 16 ongoing cases and they don't have local shelters for youth to go to. I would say maybe just building up their support system. If, it's hard because some youth, they just have you as a support system, but do they have friends that they can go to? Lots of times our kids will utilize their friends and will go meet them at a friend's house. Or is there any type of family in the area? Do they have access to a phone? Just kind of those basic things, like do they know who to call in a situation? Just those basic things are important. And then, yeah, right, like Danielle mentioned, we also refer out to community organizations, mentors, therapists, and just kind of see if we can meet needs in that way. Does that answer the question?
It does in part. And I think that
Okay.
so I have one more question, and if others have questions, feel free to chime in. Well, I'll say it's a two-part question. I really like the agreement that you shared, that kind of you walk through. It includes some of the pieces that you actually showed in your assessment tools. But seems like it's like it's certainly written with the young person in mind. But has those key components incorporated in it. That seems like it's something that could be more easily implemented in places that have less resources, and would love to hear from the group if if they agree. And then the question that I had was around the extent to which I'll call them like virtual online call kind of resources could be leveraged. Like if there is not like you couldn't do that like for any of the concrete needs that young people have, but if there is some support needs that folks could connect with via phone, text, or other kinds of ways, that also seems like something that could be useful in places that have less physical resources in their areas. So I'm just putting that out there as well for the group to respond to. Danielle, quick in a hurry, put her mute on.
I really like that idea. And even a lot of the things that were discussed, like, I think it would be something I would love to provide kids. Like, there's this number you can like call if you need assistance or help. If there's a number they can call, say like super north, if they're way north, east, west, or whatever of here that has less resources, to have kind of that call center. That's, I think, a great idea. And I think it also goes back to like a QR code that kids can like access wherever if they have their phones and Wi-Fi, of course, but that's also a need. I think it to help kids figure those things out and help them become more, be able to self-protect in certain ways too when they're out on the run.
Thank you. Any thoughts, reflections, questions from the task force? Brian?
I'm curious to learn what's done with those forms that have been filled out, like how they're stored, where they're stored, when they're referred to later, just what becomes of those. I think especially for Mallory, walking through those forms that you were showing us.
So the guides are more just utilized for our team members to have and kind of walk through different topics and aspects with kids. And then the safety agreements are more utilized for that youth to fill out with you in the field. And then if it is safe for them to take that home, then they can have that and they can refer to it. For example, I've had a youth with chronic suicidal ideation. And so we filled out a safety plan and she keeps that at home with her. And so she has the numbers kind of on her to call at any time. And she can refer back to it to if she's ever in or she feels a crisis coming on, what to kind of remember what coping mechanisms and skills that we talk to or that we talk through in that moment. And then when we fill them out with youth, that safety agreement, we have a tracking system called Civicor. And so we will upload that safety agreement to Civicor. And then we also track how many times that we create safety plans with youth, and then also how many times they utilize that safety plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mallory. And then I just put a question in the chat, and I know that we have to go back to the main room here. We're supposed to go now, but I'm going to take the time anyway. But around, whether, and this is for the whole group, if there are any training requirements for caseworkers, either those who are working with young people involved in juvenile justice or child welfare, and or providers on the kind of safety planning that you all talked about. Because I know on the child welfare side, safety planning is typically in the context of the family. And this is really focused on kids keeping themselves safe when they're on the street. And so just a question on whether and to what extent there are any requirements for folks working with young people. Lynette, I see your head shaking, so it sounds like no. And so I'm wondering if that might be an opportunity as well to educate those who are working with young people outside of these specialized groups to receive some training on safety planning for kids who run away. I see your thumb up, Lynette. A little nod from
I think
from
it's
Beth.
I think it's been a need for the last 25 years, personally.
Okay. Thank you, Lynette. All right, I know we have to go back to the main room. This has been a fantastic discussion. And I would say that, as you continue to noodle on and maybe even explore the resources that Brian shared, I think feel free to send a note to Brian, Jordan, myself, on or Trace on any thoughts or reflections that you have that might be incorporated into a recommendation. Thank you so much to our guests, Danielle and Mallory. Jordan just put in the chat the Zoom link for us to return back to the main room. So we're gonna quantum leap back over there and close this out.
Norma, are you able to click on the link?
I can't seem to get over, like to get the link to get over to the back to the main room.
If you
Norma, nothing's popping, like, I don't know, maybe my
it's okay, if
screen is
you use
frozen
the
or
original
something.
link from the calendar invite, that'll also take you back.
Okay, I'll do that. Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.